Three things are certain in life: death, taxes, and the never-ending stream of people who tell others to follow their passion. After I've seen yet another big LinkedIn influencer suggesting to his audience that in order to find their purpose, they should, quote, follow their bliss, as if this vapid garbage advice meant anything else than narcissism and lack of impulse control, I thought it would be a good idea to revisit a Forbes article I wrote 4 years ago. I realized that I still agree with it, so here it is, ready for the media consumption habits of 2022. Following your passion is nonsense. And here's what to replace it with. When someone in your life is asking the very important question, what should I do with my life? Have you ever told them, just follow your passion? If so, please stop doing that. Yes, completely and forever. Because it's garbage advice, among the worst out there, right after the original food pyramid and playing hard to get after a date. A recent Stanford research paper identifies the main flaw of this unfortunately undead trope. Finding your passion presupposes that your interests and passions are fixed rather than fluid and evolving as we mature and gain wisdom. Those who follow the fixed mindset are much more likely to give up when obstacles arise. As the authors of the paper say, urging people to follow their passion leads them to put all their eggs into one basket, but then to drop that basket when it becomes too heavy to carry. The advice to follow your passion is ubiquitous in certain parts of our culture who value short-term emotional comfort over all other mental states. But by putting emotion on a pedestal, we are perpetrating various minor and major crimes against reason and common sense. Number one, following your passion presupposes that you have one, but many people don't. And while everybody has a unique combination of talents, most people's inner orchestra does not coalesce into playing a tune that they can hear or even dance to. So when you tell them to follow some inner voice that just isn't there for them, you're just leaving them feeling unnecessarily inadequate. Problem number two, it ignores the market. Unless you have a trust fund waiting for you, you need to feed yourself and others. But by putting your interests above what the market demands, you're much more likely to end up driving an Uber than a Maserati. And I know what I'm talking about. My first startup was a perfect example of putting the cart before the horse. Also, armies of students studying pointless degrees like gender studies or sociology are a perfect example of putting personal interests above what the market demands. Or, as venture capitalist Harry Briggs put it, if you want to pursue something that you enjoy, it might be a sign of laziness rather than of genuine passion. And problem number three, it will turn passion into a job. Startup founder Paul Archer learned it the hard way. Passionate for travel, he trotted the globe in a cab, he wrote a book about it, he even got sponsors for it, and all of that made it less enjoyable as a career path. And now he says, I can still fulfill my passion and travel to far-flung places in the world, but I do it for myself, not for anybody else. I don't have to film it, and I don't have to update my social media to ensure that I have enough clicks and likes. I could, of course, go on, but the more interesting question than dismantling the passion principle is, what can we replace it with? What should your advice be to the loved one who's grappling with the purpose monster? Now, I don't have a good unified field theory of career selection, but here are three very useful frameworks. Take what you want. See what resonates with you. Framework number one, learn from startups. We all know that there's many good lessons that big companies can take from startups. What is less well known that the startup approach of market validation and finding product market fit can also serve as really useful blueprints for choosing your career path. And here are the steps. Step number one, identify needs in the market that are currently not being well met. In this step, be very critical. Is there really something there, or am I deluding myself? If you're starting out, chances are that your ideas are dead wrong. For example, the absence of an app that alerts you to cut your fingernails is not a surefire sign of there being a lucrative niche. Similarly, asking yourself what the hell you're going to end up doing with that comparative literature degree is a day well spent. So as you're starting out, be conservative and identify certain niches that are definitely there and are definitely growing. There are worse fields that you could specialize in than robotics, artificial intelligence, or online marketing, to name a few. Step number two, assess your strengths. Are you good, or can you develop the skills to meet the demand you identified in step one? And now it becomes interesting. This is where passion and personal interests do play a role. Whatever is easy for you that most others have a hard time with, that's a worthy option. If you have excelled at organizing events, there's a hint. If you've been coding since age 12, there's a hint. The cardinal sin of the passion principle is that it only considers that point without going through step one and the coming step three. And that is how philosophy graduates end up delivering pizza. Step number three, match up these two things, what the market needs and where you are good at in a constant iterative process. Unfortunately, work is not done after step 1 and 2. You'll have to eat humble pie, start at the very bottom of the hierarchy, and through a constant cycle of getting smarter, building experience, and trying different business models. For example, should you become an employee? Should you become a freelancer? Or should you maybe even start a startup and get investment? You will slowly get the hang of it. Or you get the hang of it very fast, you become a millionaire at age 25 and we all hate you. But for most of us mere mortals, this process can take many years and possibly even decades, and it contains many nights battling anxiety and sleeplessness, so buckle up. Heather Russell, a real estate entrepreneur, is a staunch detractor of the passion principle. She told me, was I passionate about real estate when I started? Absolutely not. However, we found an opening in the market, and so we decided to build a solution for it. And then I had to develop a passion for all the things associated with that market. And that leads us to framework 2. Develop a passion, don't follow it. Cal Newport's seminal book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, is the leading intellectual ammo for us passion principle deniers. His central thesis is that developing rare and valuable skills will lead to far greater career satisfaction because A, you're going to be financially stable, and B, you're going to have much more control over your time. And slowly you develop a passion as you gain profound expertise in your field. And a corollary to this approach is Cal Newport's concept of reverse engineering your lifestyle. Know how you want to live, and then develop a career around that vision. Your choices will need to be different if you want to live somewhere deep in the woods versus if you want a jet-setter lifestyle. Now, developing your passion sounds more fun than it is because learning and developing skills is inherently painful. Falling off your bike hurts. So again, buckle up. Cal Newport also points out that those who were raised on a passion diet switch directions often. As those passions bump up against obstacles in the real world, those afflicted are more likely to give up and jump towards the next shiny objects than if they were guided by rational considerations. The urge for novelty is what we have to fight. Angela Duckworth, the author of the book Grit, provides a very good mental model for overcoming this tendency. Quote, "One of the skills you must develop in life if you care not to be a dilettante is to substitute nuance for novelty." Framework number 3, money talks. A truly deplorable archetype is the starving actor who borrows money from his parents, neglects his family financially, but refuses to give up on his art because he's so passionate about it, even if they are only 7 mildly bored people in the audience. I have a guy like that in my extended family. Few transgressions are as morally repugnant as going full Anna Karenina and abdicating your duty in the pursuit of passion. I'd like to propose a modified Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Very humbly, I'll call it the Bohannes hierarchy of career fulfillment. The bottom, number 1, be mentally and physically healthy. The second layer, get an income. The third layer, have a plan. Fourth layer, follow your passion, if you must. Layer 1 is obvious. You cannot run a machine that is in dire need of repair, so make sure you always run at peak performance. Layer 2 is the bitch slap to the starving actor. If the alternative is borrowing from your parents beyond age 20 and feeding your family Weetabix that you bought in bulk, screw your passion. Even if it means digging ditches, get an income. Layer 3 is Cal Newport's advice: fix the lifestyle and then work backwards. Once the basics have been taken care of, make a plan for your life that will maximize your personal fulfillment and feeling of purpose. Part of it will be to develop a rare and valuable skill and to constantly match up what the market needs with your skill until you get to a point where you can dictate the terms of your engagements. And then, and only then, comes the time for following your passion. Layer 4, then go ahead and write that brilliant musical about animated breakfast cereals, or get the gender studies degree, or maybe not. When I was starting out in my career, I, as many others, was inspired by Steve Jobs' Following the Dots Stanford commencement address, where he extols the virtue of following your bliss. Now I realize this is part of the flawed passion narrative, and is one of the unhealthiest carb fillers that the YouTube-bound meaning war chokes on. Although Steve Jobs doesn't mention the word passion, his message is the same: do what you love. I wish he had had the humility to say, this has worked for me, and I'm just one guy, and a freaking genius on top of that, like one happens only once in a generation, so take it with a grain of salt. It is true that some people hear the calling and can indeed follow their passion, but they are in the minority, and they don't need to hear the follow your passion advice. They do it anyway, and they never ask themselves, what should I do with my life? The question that so many young people these days struggle with. Steve Jobs was one of those few people who heard the calling. But thankfully, there's a positive counterpoint to this Jobsian narcissism, which is extrapolating something that has worked for you and not acknowledging that most people do not have this inner voice beckoning them on. And that positive counterpoint is Ben Horowitz's commencement speech, where he says, quote, Following your passion is a very me-centered view of the world. When you go through life, what you find is that what you take out of the world over time, be it money, stuff, accolades, is much less important than what you've put into the world. So my recommendation would be to follow your contribution. Find the thing you are great at, put that into the world, contribute to others, help the world be better, and that is the thing to follow. End quote. That sounds like a far more durable blueprint for career success and life happiness. And on that road, you will develop that passion that you're now trying to find in the rubble of conflicting priorities.